Good evening and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery for another session of Monk Chat, an opportunity to ask questions about Buddhism and my opportunity to attempt to answer them. So please feel free to type questions into the comments window and I'll do my best to give useful replies. And so I'll start with homage to the Buddha, and then I'll go through the questions and we'll see what happens. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. First off, hello to the people who have checked in online so far. Hello to Meredith, Elenisa, Victoria, Moraya, Lydia, Sean, Ryan, Vivian, Mary, Dharmika, Kaiser Friend, Ryan, Jayanta, Rick, Kumu, and everyone else who's watching. And I see there's a couple questions already. Victoria says, do you know of any major differences in the Enlightenment experience of Buddhists versus other Enlightenment paths such as the Hindu faiths? Will all enlightened people have the same end results? So it's important to understand that the definitions of the goal of the spiritual practice is different for different spiritual systems. And the methods that are being used in order to achieve that result are therefore also different. And therefore the experiences of the people who receive those results are also different. If you have several people who all say, I'm setting out on a journey, and maybe all of them describe actually somewhat similar things. All of them say, I'm going to get a backpack and fill it with necessities, and I'm going to get some good shoes, and I'm going to start walking. And you're like, oh, that all makes sense. And each person says, I'm going to go to a destination, which is a really beautiful and delightful place. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, sounds like they're all doing exactly the same thing. Except one of them is going north, one of them's going west, one of them's going east, and one of them's going south. And all of them wind up in different places because all of them had different goals. And therefore, they were all going in different directions. So it might sound like a very basic description of their path might sound like they're all doing the same thing, but they're actually going in different directions to different places. And if that was their intent all along, then that's actually completely appropriate. So one person is like, well, my idea of a beautiful, delightful place is the frozen, snowy ice fields of the North Pole. And so they start going north to the North Pole. Somebody else is like, well, my idea of a wonderful place is bright, sunny deserts in Mexico. So they start walking south. Somebody else is like, well, I want to go to California and be on the beach. So they start walking west. So then later on you ask, well, can you describe your experiences now that you've reached your goal? And you'll get 3 radically different descriptions. And you might then start thinking, oh, this is really strange. But it's actually not strange at all. So if somebody is setting out towards a particular goal, making progress towards a particular goal, and then they reach that goal, then they will describe what it's like to reach that goal. And the truth is that the goals of Buddhism and the goals of Hinduism are not the same. And therefore, the experiences of people who are advanced in those paths will not be the same. They will be different. So the basic fundamental difference, and this is more or less universally true across all forms of Hinduism, is that all of them have in some way a relationship to a concept of true soul or true self and realization of one's true self. Whereas Buddhism, the ultimate goal is realization that everything is non-self. So these are very different goals, polar opposite, in fact. So are we using similar methods? Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, often methods in Buddhist practice and Hindu practice are often quite similar. But the goals are different. We're going in different directions. And therefore, the experiences of those who have reached their goal are going to be quite different. So if you read the descriptions of Hindu masters who have had some great success in their practice, it's going to be quite different from the stories you get of advanced Buddhist practitioners and awakened people in the Buddhist system. And Lydia says, is every time we eat a donut, we're doing something unwholesome since it is only desire and not nutrition? Well, Lydia, I think you've already answered your question. If you're doing something motivated purely by desire, that kind of automatically makes it unwholesome, doesn't it? And if you're doing something that you know is harmful to your body and you're doing it just because you're full of craving, unwholesome motives, well, again, that's pretty obvious that's unwholesome behavior, isn't it? So I think, Lydia, you already know the answer to your question. It is interesting. In the contemplation of food that the Buddha gives us, one of the things the Buddha says is that we should reflect that food is neva devayana madayana mandanayana vibhusnaya, so not for fun, not for pleasure, not for beauty. Yavadeva masakaya satitya yapanaya, only for the continuance and sustenance of this body. Vihingsu paratya, and not for harming it. For avoiding causing any harm to this body. So that means if you're deliberately eating unhealthy things, then that means you are not following the Buddha's instructions. The Buddha was quite clear that we should eat in a way that does not harm or damage our body. So that means avoiding junk food, avoiding anything which is unhealthy, because that would be damaging the body and therefore contrary to the Buddha's instructions. And even more so if you're doing it purely out of desire. And if you have literally nothing else to eat, that's okay. I've sometimes had it happen during alms round where I just didn't really have much in the way of healthy things to eat. I can think of a few times when I went alms round and all I got was like chocolate-filled croissants. And don't get me wrong, I'm perfectly happy to eat chocolate-filled croissants, but also have to be realistic. If that's all you eat, then that's not particularly good for your body. But if that's all you have, then that's all you eat because that's all you have. So going alms round is a bit of a different scenario because you don't really have much control over what you're given. In fact, you don't have any control over what you're given. So you just do the best you can with what's given to you. But when you have a bit more control over what you're eating, then absolutely yes, you should be avoiding anything which is harmful to your body. And you should especially avoid eating purely for the sake of fun and pleasure, as the Buddha specifically says. So you look at a donut and you think, let's see, I am interested in eating this purely out of desire for fun and pleasure, and it is also damaging to my body. In other words, it is a direct violation of multiple instructions from the Buddha. So absolutely, yes, that's unwholesome conduct. Now, if you manage to find healthy donuts, that's a different story. I don't know, maybe whole wheat flour sweetened with maple syrup or something. Maybe you could find donuts that are actually made with healthy ingredients. Then it might be okay, but then you still need to look at the desire mind. Why is the mind going out of its way to try to generate more sensual pleasure when it's not necessary? Dharmika says, what is the difference between consciousness of Nama and universal consciousness? What the heck is universal consciousness? I can't think of anywhere in the suttas where the Buddha uses the term universal consciousness. So Dharmika, you would need to define what you mean by that before I could give any useful answer. Moria asks, is it the mind that becomes enlightened? If so, is the mind eternal until it becomes enlightened and does not get reborn anymore? Ooh, it's dangerous to use the word eternal, isn't it? Is it the mind that gets enlightened? Well, the terminology that we find in the suttas is the mind becomes liberated from the defilements through non-clinging. So that's a little bit different from saying the mind gets enlightened. Rather, it's that through non-clinging, the mind no longer has any defilements. There are no longer any defilements present in the mind. But then we also need to understand what we mean by mind. What we call mind is a momentary arising of temporary conditions. So that means it's not persistent for even 2 adjacent moments, let alone eternal for any length of time. So it's quite risky to say the mind gets enlightened. Rather, one can say when the conditions for defilements are removed, then the mind becomes freed from defilements. Or rather, there's the arising of a mind which has no defilements, might be even more accurate. But that is a temporary, momentary arising. And when the conditions for a mind to arise are no longer present, then a mind does not arise. I don't know if I actually clarified things or just made them muddier. So maybe, Moria, if you could ask a follow-up question if you feel like that's not sufficiently clear. Kevin says, if pain is something that we add to our experience, then what about physical pain? Isn't physical pain unavoidable? Well, it depends what you mean by pain. So when we say things like pain is something we add to our experience, what we're particularly talking about is mental suffering. So a sensation occurs. Again, let's say a physical sensation occurs. That's normal. And broadly speaking, we can categorize physical sensations into 3 categories: pleasant sensation, painful sensation, and neutral sensation. And that's all relatively okay, an okay way of talking about things. But then if we react to something with aversion, then we're producing the mental experience of mental pain. If we react to something with relishing and delight, then we produce the mental experience of mental pleasure. And if we react to something with either equanimity or apathy, then we have the mental experience of neutrality. If by physical pain you simply mean a sensation from the body which indicates something is wrong, well, of course, that's always going to be there, even in a fully awakened being. But if by pain you mean the mental suffering in response to a disliked experience, then that is only present in an unawakened being. And that is most certainly avoidable through training the mind in equanimity. Next, Visis asks, how to understand Chitta in Chittanupassana? Well, the way Chitta is described in Chittanupassana is, the Buddha says, no, a lust-filled mind is a lust-filled mind. No, a lust-free mind is a lust-free mind. No, a hate-filled mind is a hate-filled mind, and a hate-free mind is a hate-free mind. And then he gives some others. No, a constricted mind is a constricted mind. No, an expansive mind is an expansive mind, and so on. So Chitta is about understanding the current condition of the mind, the current state of the mind. So it's about knowing the current texture of the mind, the current mood of the mind. How does the mind feel right now? That's what it's about. As opposed to Dhammanupassana, which is about observing mental processes, activities, and objects. One way I understand this is it's like a painting. A painting is on a surface. It's on a canvas or a piece of paper. So Chittanupassana is observing the texture and shape of the canvas, whereas Dhammanupassana is observing the picture which is drawn on the canvas. Or a movie theater. The movie images are projected onto a screen. Chittanupassana is observing the screen, the shape of the screen, the texture of the screen, the size of the screen, the condition of the screen. Dhammanupassana is watching the movie. So Moria says, I had an experience today while hiking, and I'm sure that me and my dog were protected from danger by devas. What can I do to repay them? Dedicate the merit of your practice to them. Actually, this is something which we find recommended in many places in the suttas, sharing merit with the devas, and asking for the devas to watch over you and protect you. These are things that are mentioned in the suttas. So yeah, dedicate merit to them. Wish that the goodness of your practice be for their benefit as well. And ask that they continue to watch over and protect both you and all the other Buddhists in the area. Gregory says, you recently mentioned a practice of mindfulness of body resulting in a sense of pleasure, parenthesis, piti, question mark. Is this only in meditation or something that can be practiced at other times? It can be practiced at all times, but it is, of course, supported by cultivating it during meditation practice. So what I recommend is at all times, in every waking moment, to cultivate a sharp, intense, joyful, serene awareness of your body. So always cultivating an intense electric awareness of your body and enjoying the experience of the body when saturated by mindfulness. Enjoying how the body feels when you're paying sharp, alert, clear attention to it. And doing so with a sense of serenity and calm and ease. So relaxing into this intense, joyful experience of the body. So of course, this is easiest to cultivate during meditation practice, but it's something that ideally you should be doing all day long. And Ryan says, I heard Ajahn Martin say that he made sufficient merit to guarantee parents' rebirth in the heaven realm, but did not specify. What can we as laypersons do to guarantee rebirth of our loved ones in the heaven realms? So I've heard the name Ajahn Martin a couple times, but I don't know anything about him. So I can't really comment on what he meant by that. Ideally, you should ask Ajahn Martin what they meant by what they said. Because my first thought is actually that you can't guarantee anyone's rebirth anywhere. You can't even guarantee your own rebirth anywhere. What you can do is create conditions to influence your rebirths. This is spoken about in a few places in the suttas. So forming an aspiration to have a particular kind of rebirth, when backed up by sufficient good karma, can in fact produce the desired result. But the ideal aspiration is the aspiration to be reborn in optimal conditions for practicing Dhamma. So rebirth in heaven realms is not Buddhist. It's not bad. It's just not Buddhist because it doesn't have anything to do with attaining awakening. And you also cannot guarantee somebody else's rebirth anywhere because each person's rebirth is dependent upon their own karma, not on yours. So we talk about dedicating karma to others, but technically it's impossible. We still do it because it's a good practice, but technically it's impossible. You cannot change your parents' karma. You can give them the opportunity to change their own karma, and that is something that we do. So dedicating merit to others is giving them the opportunity to change their own karma. And that's a good thing to do. But they still need to take the next step of changing their own karma accordingly. Kumu says, did Rahula Arahant Tero pass away parinibbana before the Buddha? If so, he must have been not that old. Anything you know more about Rahula Tero from the Pali Canon and other sources? So the traditional account that we have in the Pali Canon is that the Buddha passed away first. And the traditional story, and whether or not this is accurate is uncertain. The traditional story is that Venerable Rahula was not yet an arhat at the time the Buddha passed away. And that when the Buddha passed away, Rahula was very distressed. Because although he had been the Buddha's attendant for decades, he still had not yet attained full awakening. And he was very distressed that with the Buddha passing away, that he would no longer have the opportunity to attain awakening in this life. And the story goes that Rahula then practiced very intently, with a lot of persistence and forcefulness and dedication, trying really hard. And finally he gave up and was like, okay, I give up. I guess I'm not attaining awakening in this life. And he went to take a nap. And the story goes that when he laid down to take a nap, then he finally let go completely. And in that moment of letting go, he became an arhat. And supposedly this all happened after the Buddha's passing. Whether this story is true or not is unclear because it's not actually found in the early Buddhist texts. It's something that came up a little bit later in the history of Buddhist scripture. It's a nice story though, so it's one of the potentially apocryphal stories that I still like to retell because it's a nice story. But the traditional story is in fact that Rahula was significantly younger than the Buddha. Of course, I mean, it was the Buddha's child. Oh, I just got totally mixed up. I just told the story of Ananda. Wow. I think I'm the one who needs to take a nap. That was the story of Ananda, not the story of Rahula. Wow. Okay. Note to self, get more sleep. Okay, so did Rahula pass away before the Buddha? No, Rahula passed away long after the Buddha. Rahula was much younger than the Buddha, about 30 years younger than the Buddha, in fact. And there's actually not a whole lot of information about Rahula after the passing of the Buddha. Wow, I just gave the whole rant about Ananda and it was totally irrelevant. That was great. Okay. Anyway, I also like the story of Ananda because it's very cute. Okay. Oopsie. Moral of the story, don't take yourself too seriously. Okay, Cynthia says, if I don't become a bhikkhuni, then I feel I have little instruction other than the 5 precepts. Well, then maybe you should become a bhikkhuni. Then you'll have a lot more instructions. But honestly, if you strictly follow the 5 precepts, periodically follow the 8 precepts, maybe even commit to following the 8 precepts for the rest of your life, read the suttas every day, do meditation every day, do puja every day, that actually will be tremendously productive. Yeah, keep going. Just keep doing your practice. Manny says, I had been to a Goenka meditation course, but they do not provide a chair. I found it painful to sit on the floor, but they insist. I am able to meditate better sitting on a chair. Any thoughts? Sit on the floor. God, don't be lazy. Endure the pain. In enduring pain, you can develop a lot of equanimity. There's a reason why they do that at those retreats. It's because a lot of people have this idea that they need to meditate in a chair. But if you just don't give them an option and they wind up meditating on the floor for a few days, then most people realize that actually they don't need a chair. And they're perfectly fine meditating on the floor. Do you go through a lot of pain and misery and suffering on the way? Yeah, of course you do. But at some point you realize that the pain and the misery and suffering is literally all in your mind. And the body is just the body. And there's not actually anything wrong with sitting on the floor. And this whole story of I can't sit on the floor is just a story we tell ourselves. It's not true at all. Gregor says, what do you think of the Buddhism of the Diamond Path? I don't know anything about it, to be honest. I've never looked into it. Broadly speaking, when we talk about Buddhism, I'm most interested in getting as close as possible to the original words of the Buddha, the original teachings of the Buddha. So the more distant something becomes from the original teachings, the less interested I am. So as far as I've been able to see from what little I've looked into it, is the Diamond Path is a very modern reinvention of Vajrayana Buddhism. And that is of somewhere close to zero interest to me. So I don't have any opinion on it because it's not something that I really have any interest in. That said, if you look at it and you find the core principles of the Noble Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths, and it's teaching the 3 universal characteristics, then it's probably okay. But look carefully, make sure there's not wrong view mixed in, make sure there's not wrong practices mixed in. Because that's often what you find. Often what you find whenever there's some new fad in Buddhism is it's bits and pieces of Buddhist, actual authentic Buddhist teachings mixed in with a bunch of wrong view and wrong practice. So we always need to refer back to the original strata of Buddhist teachings to understand what is the Dhamma and how does one practice correctly in accordance with Dhamma. And that is, in fact, the Noble Eightfold Path, Four Noble Truths, 3 characteristics. Yeah, it's karma, it's rebirth, it's awakening. These are the core principles of Buddhism. Rick says, I have been experiencing latent aversion. Welcome to the club, Rick. Welcome, welcome. It seems to stem from living in a catch-22. If I push myself, chronic pain and illness take my body to a place of breakdown. If I hold back and rest more, I don't get much done in life and practice. This has started to cause resistance to physical practice, even though I remain dedicated to the path. Do you have any suggestions? Yes, do lots of metta. Lots of metta. That's what I recommend. And relax. Everything's okay. Do lots of metta and relax. That's what I recommend. Moria says, it is difficult to conceive of the mind as not eternal because it remembers things from long ago, even past lives. How is memory possible if every mind arising is not the same as the one before? There's actually a metaphor from the commentaries. It's one of the few good things found in the commentaries, where it gives the image of a candle. It says, let's say that you have a candle flame, so a lit candle, and you use that candle to light another candle. Is the candle flame on the second candle exactly the same as the candle flame on the first one? Or is the second candle flame something that was created by the conditions of the first one? So is it a continuation of the exact same flame? Or is it something new that was made possible by the first one? So this is used as a metaphor to help show how each moment creates the conditions for the arising of consciousness in the subsequent moment, and how it creates the appearance of continuity, of a continuously existent mind. But actually what is happening is that in each moment, there's a set of conditions which ignite the next moment. Just as the first flame ignites the second flame, but they're not the same flame. So there's the illusion of continuity. But in actuality, it's one thing sparking another thing, which then sparks another thing, which then sparks another thing, and so on. And Lydia says, what does Tero mean after your name? Well, the word Tera means elder or senior. It's the same word from which we get the word Theravada. So Vada means the sayings or words or the teachings or the doctrine. So Theravada means the sayings of the elders or the sayings of the seniors. So Thera is commonly used as a polite appellation for a senior monk. Sometimes it's used as a polite appellation for any monk. The female form is Teri, so you'll sometimes see Teri when it's talking about a female monk. So Thera or Tero and Teri is all have the meaning of elder or senior. It's just a polite way to refer to a monk, especially one who's been a monk for many years. A more elevated form is Mahatera, which means great elder, great senior, which is normally for people who've been monks for a lot of years. Manny says, Karniya Metta Sutta says one should be determined to be always mindful of goodwill and non-hate. But Satipatthana Sutta insists mindfulness of body, mind, etc., which is important. Both are important. So the Karniya Metta Sutta is more focused on mind because it's in fact talking about metta, which is an aspect of mind. So yeah, Karniya Metta Sutta doesn't really have much to do with mindfulness of the body because that's not its point. That's not its focus. Its focus is on metta, which is a mental quality. Therefore, it's in a category of mindfulness of mind rather than in the category of mindfulness of the body. So you need both mindfulness of body and mindfulness of mind. And metta is an aspect of mind. Let's see. Kauser Friend says, how does dedicating merit create karmic opportunities for others? Is this possible even if they don't know you did so? Well, the idea is that by dedicating merit to others, you're giving them the opportunity to rejoice in your good karma. And the act of them rejoicing in your good karma is itself an act of good karma. So that's the basic principle. Is this possible even if they don't know you did so? In theory, yes, because theoretically someone can be subconsciously aware, even if they're not consciously aware. But ideally, they should actually consciously know, because that gives them the best opportunity to, again, rejoice in the goodness that you've done. Kauser Friend says, do you know of any suttas about this? Yes, but not off the top of my head. I would have to look them up. Ryan says, could you please explain anatta for a total beginner? No, because it's not a beginner level topic. I mean, it's kind of like asking a mathematics professor, can you please explain calculus for a beginner? Or asking a physics professor, can you please explain quantum physics for a beginner? And the answer is no. But we can give basic ideas about it. So one way of starting to get a sense of it is to ask yourself, what do I define myself as? Like, if you were to write a list of everything which you consider to be me, write a list of all of your traits, personality traits, everything that defines you. And then ask yourself, for each one of those items on the list, ask yourself, is this permanent? Has it always been this way, and will it always be this way? And if you're being honest, you'll find that for pretty much everything on the list, the answer is going to be no. It has not always been this way, and it could change in the future. It could become different. So then that means that whatever your current self-identity is therefore temporary. Whatever you currently think of as self, whatever you currently think of as me, is in fact only a temporary experience, and therefore it's not ultimately who you are. This is one way of starting to approach the concept of non-self. So the concept of non-self, briefly, is that nothing whatsoever is me or mine. Nothing whatsoever is my true self or my true nature. This is basically what it says. May says, if there is nothing that continues, then why seek liberation? Liberation is already occurring. So May, the question is, are you currently experiencing freedom from suffering? Are you currently experiencing freedom from delusion? If the answer is yes, then great. Yeah, you have nothing you need to do. If the answer is no, then you have something you need to do. Moria says, how do memories travel from mind to mind? In the flame metaphor, you wouldn't expect the second flame to remember the experiences of the first, but this is what happens with the mind, what remembers. So now I'm actually thinking about computers. So let's imagine you have a computer, and there's a file saved on the hard drive. And so you plug in a USB drive, and you copy the file over. Do people still use USB drives? Is that still a thing? Okay. Not so much. Cloud, people more into cloud drives these days? Okay. I'm still going to talk about USB drives because I'm old, and that means I talk about things that are out of date. So you have a file on your computer, and you copy it to the USB drive, and then you delete the copy that's on your computer. And then you take that USB drive and you plug it into another computer, and you copy the file from the USB drive to that other computer, and then you delete the file on the USB drive. So is the file on the new computer exactly the same as the one that's on the old computer? Or to be more precise, is the second computer the same as the first computer, just because the file's been copied over? Is the USB drive in between, is that exactly identical to the first and second computer? So just because some piece of information has been copied across multiple places does not mean that each of those is therefore a continuation of the same being. It just means that some information has been copied from one source and pasted into another source. So another way of looking at this is if you come up with a story in your mind, and then you tell that story to somebody else, and then that other person remembers the story and tells it to somebody else, and then that person remembers that story and tells it to somebody else, does that then mean that all of those are the same people? So if Jane tells Bob a story and Bob tells John a story and John tells Sally a story, does that now mean that Jane and Bob and John and Sally are all exactly the same person? Or does it just mean that a story has been passed on? So it's the same with memories. A memory is just a story. It's a story that gets passed on to a future moment of consciousness, a future moment of mind arising. It doesn't mean that each moment of mind arising is a persistent continuity. It just means that a piece of information has been copy-pasted from one moment to another. Ryan says, also, if you could please self-use with offensive, hurtful speech and actions from others. I don't understand what you're asking, Ryan, so maybe if you could clarify and give a bit more detail. Visa says, is Metta Chittanupasana or Dhamma? Presumably Dhammanupasana. I would say that Metta itself, as in the actual felt experience of Metta, is part of Chittanupasana, whereas the mental activities used to generate Metta are Dhammanupasana. That's probably how I would relate to it. Kumu says, is it correct if we use the analogy of a flame of a torch rotated fast in a circular motion, appearing as a solid circle of fire, for the appearance of the mind as a non-changing eternal phenomenon? I'm not sure I'm following the metaphor here at this point. I mean, in terms of something which is itself a constantly changing process, but which generates the illusion of a persistent object. I mean, actually, the flame itself already does that. So we talk about a flame as though it's some persistent object, but actually it's a process which is always changing. So a flame is already a good demonstration of mind. You don't even need to swing the torch in a circle. So it creates the illusion of a persistent object, but actually every moment it's a new arising. So a flame is already a description of our experience. Victoria says, is there any mention of the karmic consequences of deciding to not have children? And does the intention of why you decide to have children, if you choose to, determine whether it's a positive or negative action? Well, I do find it interesting that enlightened beings, by definition, never have children. So I think that already gives you a little bit of a sense of what's going on here. That the decision to have children necessarily always comes from some degree of defilement and delusion. Because those who have no defilement and no delusion do not produce children. So this should already give you some sense right there. So, of course, there's different possible intentions. Some people have children out of blatantly selfish motives, or even harmful motives, so that's clearly more bad. But I would say that deliberately producing children is something which is always arising from some level of defilement and delusion. As for karmic consequences of deciding to not have children, well, again, it depends upon why. If you're just like, oh, I hate children, I don't want anything to do with those disgusting little monsters, so I'm not going to have any. Well, that is an unwholesome mind state. So that unwholesome attitude is in fact something which is productive of harmful results. So it depends on the attitude. If on the other hand, you're like, I don't have any reason, I don't have any good reason to produce children. And doing so would only make my life more complicated and make it harder for me to practice meditation and study the suttas and practice renunciation. So because I value my Dhamma practice, I'm choosing not to have children. That's actually a perfectly wholesome motivation. Maria says, I've used USB. Soon, Maria, we will be the old people in nursing homes talking about dead technology that nobody knows what it is anymore. I'll be like 90 years old and I'll be like, when I was a kid, we had USB drives. And they'll be like, okay, Bante. Ryan says, if there is no self, who is it that which becomes offended by hurtful, offensive speech and actions by others? Well, the Buddha would reply, that's not a valid question. Because it's already presupposing the existence of a being. When you say, who is it that becomes offended, you're already presupposing that there is a person who can become offended. Rather, when there is the delusion of self and there is desire to be treated in a particular way, then when undesirable treatment occurs, then suffering arises. That would be a more accurate way of talking. So if you don't expect anything from others, then you will not be bothered by what they do. If you expect other people to speak to you politely, then, well, bad news, you're in for a lot of suffering. If you expect other people to be kind and polite and considerate, well, bad news, lots of suffering coming your way. But if you recognize that the nature of the world is that sometimes you'll get treated with kindness and sometimes with unkindness, then you will not be bothered. Okay, Rick says, this list was offered during a recent Dhamma Q&A. Can you clarify each Pali term and how to apply each to our Dhamma practice? 7 unwholesome qualities to watch for at the sense doors. Didn't we just do this sutta a couple days ago? Sounds familiar. Response to pleasant contact. Oh, Rick, we just went through the sutta a day or two ago, so I recommend you look up the recording of the sutta and look at that. Ryan says, are you familiar with Bhikkhu Mahachitta from the Netherlands? No, I am not. But if you want to put him in touch with me, I'd be happy to meet him. Amaranta says, I decided to share some information about the Pali Canon and Theravada without any interest, not money, only for sharing, because here there are many people that have interests. Do you think this is right? Do you have some advice? But generally speaking, I think it's fine. So if people want to know about Buddhism, then you can share what you know. Just always be clear. Like if there are limits to your knowledge, then be honest and upfront about that. Just tell people, if you want to learn more, here's some good resources for learning more. If you want to investigate Buddhism more deeply, here's places you can go, or here's ways to get access to more information. But yeah, if you're doing it generally because you wish to help other people better understand Buddhism, then that's actually really good. That's really wholesome. And May says, I still don't understand how your explanation of Anatta is actually anything different from Atman. It's literally the polar opposite concepts. Literally. Anatta literally is anatman, no Atman. It's literally the exact opposite of Atman. May says, there still seems to be an assertion of something that continues. No, there's not. Ryan says, did the Buddha speak about forgiveness? I've not found much on forgiveness in the suttas. There's a huge amount, actually. One of the problems is that the main word that's used for forgiveness can also be translated in other ways. And that word is khanti. So the word khanti is commonly translated as patience, which is actually one of its meanings, and it's often the right meaning. It's also translated as endurance, which is also a valid meaning. It's also translated as acceptance, which is also an accurate meaning. It's also translated as tolerance, which is also accurate. And it also means forgiveness. And if you know this range of meanings, then you'll realize that actually the Buddha spoke about forgiveness all over the place. It's just that from the Buddhist perspective, forgiveness naturally comes together with these other qualities: patience, endurance, acceptance, tolerance, forgiveness. These are a bundle, they're a package. They're all interconnected. So translators, in the history of English translations of Buddhist texts, they've tended to favor the other connotations of the word khanti instead of the connotation of forgiveness. And that can give the impression that the Buddha didn't talk about forgiveness very much. But actually, it's all over the place. When you start looking for the word khanti, you'll see it's all over the place. Moria says, is it Kamma that is igniting the flame and giving rise to a new mind from moment to moment? I mean, it's you can look at it that way. So Kamma is creating the conditions which make it possible for a new mind moment to arise, and which determine the characteristics and traits of that mind moment's arising. So in that sense, yeah, you could say that's what ignites the arising of the new mind moment. And that's the end of the questions online. So I think we'll go ahead and conclude it this time. So thank you all for your wonderful questions. If there's more questions, then write them down and bring them to Monk Chat next time. And if there's anything which was unclear, you're also welcome to make a note of that. And again, ask for more clarification next time. So for now, we'll conclude with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.